Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Pie Before Dinner. It's Dr. Lou, your favorite mathematics guru and community organizer. Hey, listen, we got a great show today. I am here in the studio talking with some really fabulous, powerful Black women of change. The one, Dr. Holly Pope. Dr. Holly Pope out of the Stanford University, currently in Buffalo, New York, and Kwashanda Kudaisi. Did I get that right?
Yes, you got it.
Kwashanda is a PhD candidate at the University of South Florida. Ladies, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Just slightly beyond trauma is this idea of resilience and innovation, and how Black people in mathematics have always and currently are innovating and have these stories of resilience in the space. And I want to open that up if you don't mind. Dr. Holly, I want to start with you. Tell me about what was it like growing up into this mathematics professional? What was it like?
Yeah, so I started out, like I told you before, I was always good at math. I was good at memorizing and following procedures, and I liked the routineness of it. And so I just persisted in it. I did well in school all the way through high school. And like Kwashanda said before, we backstage, I went to college to be an engineer, thinking that going basically off of what people told me to do because I was so good at math, you should be an engineer or a doctor.
Is there any one memory that kind of stands out?
It's not a memory, but a feeling. I felt isolated and alone.
Tell me more about that.
I just felt like there was no purpose for me to be there. I was surrounded by people that didn't look like me, people that didn't understand me or care to understand me. And I felt like I've always been a giving person. And so I felt like in that space at that time, it wasn't the right place for me to make a change for other people. And so, I decided that it just wasn't for me and I needed to figure out where I fit.
Kwashanda, I want you to chime in. What do you notice about your story? Are there any powerful moments in your story in becoming this Black woman in mathematics? You're about to work on your dissertation in the fall, and so you'll be a newly minted PhD in mathematics and mathematics education. And so that's so awesome. We celebrate you. We affirm you in our community.
One of the powerful moments that stick out is being in college and taking some of those upper level math courses and just being one of the only Black students. I was actually one of two. There was a Black guy also in one of the upper level math courses, and I could just remember feeling so alone. And that may have something to do with the school that I chose to go to. It was a predominantly white institution, and so I really didn't feel supported. I even joined the math club at the college, and I could remember I just stopped going because it was just, I was the only Black person, and it was just really hard to make connections with other people within mathematics. And so it was definitely a struggle.
Right.
Now, my high school days were different. Well, I went to a 99.9% Black from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. And so I was always good in mathematics. And I just always, I just felt supported. I was around my peers. I would help them. And it was just very affirming. And because there was just us at the school, I was never made to feel like I was trying to be somebody that I was not. I was just me, and I just happened to be good at math. But when I began to enter those other spaces, like I was saying before the show, once I graduated, I got an internship at General Electric, which in my town was is the major company where engineers work. And when I got that internship, it was just, I always wanted to be an engineer, but then going through that experience, it kind of discouraged me because, there was nobody that really looked like me. So it was hard to make those connections. And then the people there were all white women. And I'm very social, and it just felt like I was alone, and so I didn't pursue engineering.
Wow, you both bring out this point about isolation and feeling alone in the space.
Hmm.
This is so powerful because I wish that my friend and a colleague of mine on Facebook, a white male who um, posted something on Facebook yesterday or the other day, and I had to really think. I had to challenge it, and I didn't know how to challenge it. And this is how these things happen. And he, he posted this comic that showed uh, women and gender studies. So it said the sciences, and then it said engineering studies. There were two tables, and there was a group of women who were going to the table of gender studies and not to the table of sciences. And so when they
Hmm.
finished, they were holding up these picket signs. Finished college, they were holding up these picket signs. Why aren't the women in science? And I was so offended by it because
Hmm.
this is so ignorant. And all of them, all the people who posted in the comments were men. And
Hmm.
I was so offended. Like I was so offended because my sister is a mechanical engineer. She's a physics teacher, math teacher as well, math instructional coach, and president of Bermuda's Bermuda's Council for Teachers of Mathematics. So I was so offended
Hmm.
because I know a great many women, black women
That
in
are doing
particular,
it.
who are human, who are into sciences, and right, and have very strong gender studies capacity, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
both.
Mhm.
There's no
There's an
need to.
intersection.
There's an intersection. That's very
Mhm.
good. I was so offended. So I wrote and I said, look, this is just totally inaccurate. It's stereotypical, and it's part of what's wrong with the white male image of the sciences. Because even in the cartoon, there was ignorance because all of the people were white in the picture.
Mhm.
That's
And
a whole nother layer.
hold on, we were invisible, right? We were invisible in this
Right.
space. But you talk about isolation.
Mhm.
That's too powerful. Well recognized women talking about isolation in the community. Let's open that up. Why do you think that's the case for us as black people, and maybe more specifically black girls and black women? I didn't
Well,
bring that question up in the pregame.
it's a loaded question, but I'm just gonna put it
Yeah.
out there because it was like that because we're not seen as people who do math or who can excel at math.
Mm.
People look at us and they, I'm sorry, but they think that, we're bums on the street or something. Um, I experienced this even on flying, traveling, going on the airplane. I even got treated differently when I wore a
Hmm.
Stanford sweatshirt versus when I didn't because of the color of my skin.
Wow, wow.
And it's just the racism is just the air that we breathe here. And we felt isolated because we were isolated because they felt like we didn't belong in that space. I don't know,
Hmm.
Khadijah, what do you think?
I agree with you, Dr. Holly. I feel like the root cause of a lot of it is racism, and feeling like there's like two ways that we don't belong, right? So first we're
Mhm.
women in
Mhm.
mathematics, and then we also have that additional layer of being black women in mathematics. And
Mhm.
then I'm not sure the kind of university you went to, but I went to a predominantly white university, and so well, I guess Sanford
Yes.
is,
Well, that
yeah. So
was
you
for the
probably know.
PhD. For undergrad, yeah. Yes, it was predominantly white.
Right. And so being surrounded by your white peers, and you being one of the only ones there, it's almost like they feel you don't belong there. And then
Mhm.
directly or indirectly, then they begin to dismiss you. And
Mhm.
so even when you are in a group and you're working and you have the right answer, right? Or you already said the answer, then
Yeah.
your peer may speak up and say the exact same thing,
Mhm.
and they're given the credit for it when you were the one who did that. And that's not a new thing. We see that throughout history with Katherine Johnson and so many things in this world that we as black people made contributions to. Other people take the credit.
Mhm. Oh,
I also experienced some of that in graduate school. But I would say I experienced more of that as a teacher amongst
mhm.
white peers, some of my white colleagues, I should say. And so I definitely think is directly related to racism.
And welcome if you're listening, guys. This is Pie Before Dinner. It's a live community inspiration show in and around mathematics, etc. But we're really talking about racialized oppression, racial trauma in
Hmm.
mathematics. But we're talking about it through the lens of resilience. These are two very resilient people on in the studio today, Dr. Holly Pope and Mrs. Korshanda Kudaisi. And we're talking about our struggles of resilience in the space. Um, it's two things, right? It's this notion of race, and then there's this notion of intersectionality with race and gender in the space. I excelled in mathematics throughout my career, my high school career, and I was in a black school. But then I went to a white school, a predominantly white institution, and I was one of only two blacks in the class. For the first time in my life, I felt dumb. I started in class. I couldn't talk. I couldn't think straight.
Hmm.
And I struggled because I felt like my spirit was being challenged at every turn, right?
Mhm.
There's a form of slow violence in mathematics. You
Hmm.
agree?
Yes.
I definitely agree with that on so many different levels. Me as a student, but also me as an educator, seeing it being afflicted among students.
Mhm.
And so, as you said, like it almost kills the spirit of the students slowly. Like they're
Come
so
on.
excited about being in mathematics, and then they're
Hmm.
told that they can't.
Come on.
And then there's so many issues with like who's educating our students. And it's so crucial in mathematics because like we've talked about before, like mathematics is the gatekeeper for so many careers,
Mhm.
right? And so if you've been made to feel like you can't do it and that you're dumb and that you don't belong in this space, then it's almost like you're shutting the destiny for some students who
Right.
really belong in that space, right? Like we know some people don't like math, right? But I feel that so many students that would have excelled greatly in math have
Mhm.
been put down in so many different situations. And so I definitely agree with that. What do you think, Dr. Holly?
I agree. I agree. And I think, there might be some teachers who just might blatantly say things, you're just not good at math. This isn't for you. But there are many more teachers who give that implicit method by the way that they teach
Hmm.
and by what they teach to which students, even by
Hmm.
what kinds of questions and conversations that they have with the different students. So it really
Yeah.
boils down to, this. I mean, you can call it implicit bias, unconscious bias, but the bottom line is, and it's in the research on gender studies, it's in the research on race. Um, Teachers treat different students differently based on their gender and their race and
Hmm.
even perceived ability. So like
Hmm.
if
Perceived ability.
yes, perceived ability. Don't get me on my soapbox.
I want to stay on your soapbox and let me break up this party here for a second. You
Okay.
don't mind if I say something? Cortana, you don't think I didn't notice you taking over, right? I noticed that. Cortana, come on now. I'm gonna tell you like I learned down south. Don't do me like this. Don't do me like this.
I pass the ball back to you.
Cortana, my mama is watching this show. My sister's watching this show. Don't do me like this. Don't do me like this. Well, look, it's so right. Let's stay there because I I want to address the language real quick. I saw some notes in the chat, and I want to address this language real quick. Two things that I wholeheartedly reject. I wholeheartedly reject these ideas. Well, all of this language I've learned, I have to, as I've gotten my PhD, the more distance from it, I've had to reject some things,
Hmm.
unlearn some stuff, just so I can be of use to my people, right?
Right.
One is this idea of disadvantaged. I do not use those terms,
Yes.
disadvantage, because we are not disadvantaged. We never were disadvantaged. In fact, white folk
Mm.
were disadvantaged and are continually disadvantaged when they don't have the opportunity to have our talents included in their space.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're all at risk. If black folk are not included in the space, we're all at risk. I'm not speaking out of school here. Last week we talked about racial trauma and how to overcome it. And one of the things Dr. Hardy talks about is making external the internal. And one
Mm.
of the impacts of
Mm.
racism in mathematics and racism in our society is that it's taught us to internalize deficit language to ourselves, and
Yeah.
then we
Mm.
speak it. So let's turn it on its head. And that's why we're telling these stories about race and race in our lives, because we need to turn the story on. Do you think that most people believe that everybody can be a mathematician?
No.
No.
Okay.
I think their actions speak louder than their words.
Right.
I think
And
that
that's
they
what I was
might,
gonna say.
yeah, they tell their students, "Oh, you can do it. You can be anything you want to be." But, really in their minds they're like, "Yeah, you ain't going to be nothing but a drug dealer."
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and kids pick up on that.
Mhm.
They pick up on that. You can't you have to really believe in your students, and I think that is the problem that's happening in our schools with our students now right now. Our kids are crying out. They know that the system wasn't built for them, and they know that many of their teachers don't really believe that they can do whatever they want to do or be whatever they want to be. And so
Mhm.
so it's just like we're having the protests on the streets, the students protest in the classrooms. Khadijah,
Mm.
I was
I agree. I like that you mentioned the facts that like there are people saying that all students can learn math, but then you can talk all you want, but your
Mhm.
actions is what's going to shine through. And
Yep.
so, in the same way, I've heard teachers say, all students can learn, all students can do math. But then when you're actually in the classroom, what is your actions communicating?
Mhm.
Right? And like you said, students know that. Students feel
Mhm.
that. And even in schools where they would say, or classrooms where they would say, these kids can't do it, or it's too many
Yeah.
behavior problems. I've been in those same classrooms, and you said you did it for 39 days. And so I think,
Mhm.
if you start at the beginning of the year with students and you
Right.
communicate your expectations and you let them know, I don't care what nobody said about you. I know
Mhm.
you can do it, and that's what I'm going to expect from you. Then
Right.
kids will rise to that. But
Yes.
when teachers enter into the classroom with this deficit mindset already, they begin
Mhm.
to say things like, "Oh, well, they can't do the homework, so I'm not going to give them that." And then they
Right.
begin to say, um, they're in the lower level math class. I'm just gonna teach this one topic all year. And it's
Right.
like that is what's disadvantaging students. And
Yes.
so those same students, we begin to look at their test scores and compare them to other
Come
people.
on now. Come on.
But
Mhm.
but the teacher themselves, if the teacher is not giving students the opportunities to learn math at high levels, how do
Mm-hmm.
you
Mhm.
expect them to know that? How do you expect them to
Mhm.
perform well if
Yeah.
you are not even giving them a standard to rise to? You're
Right.
entering.
Listen. I heard a colleague of mine say at Georgia State a few years ago, we have loved our kids into mediocrity.
Mm.
No,
Mm,
we love them, but we've loved them into mediocrity. We have very low standards and
yes.
expectations for black children, black and brown children. And the sad thing of it is that we won't admit it. We won't admit it to ourselves. And I'm
Yeah.
talking across all spectrums. There's systematic, continual, sharp, acute devaluation of what black and brown children can do, and we have to, that is the biggest legacy of racism, right? Is this
Mhm.
idea
Yes.
of black inferiority as it's ingrained in almost every
Hmm.
policy we have, every special ed policy, every mathematics class you ever want to see, calculus to the general math, you can see it stratified along racial lines and
Yes.
buoyed by racial expectations. And so
Yes.
mathematics is a perfect prison to pipeline course.
Dr. Lou, to even interject there, some people are not even being given placement tests.
Yep.
They're just putting people in courses based on skin color, based on immigration status, based on perceived abilities, as Dr. Holly spoke about. And so,
yeah,
yes, even deeper than that.
Well, when we talk about our stories, it's important. I don't want people to simply position us, me, you, or anybody in the space of let's just talk about what I did to get over and how I made it through. Like, I think we have to, as Dr. Hardy says, we have to name what we went through. We have to externalize it. We have to name it. And we have to externalize how the evaluation, and we have to tell our stories racially, right? We have to tell these stories. But we also have to tell the stories of resilience and innovation. And how do you think our stories of resilience benefit the way forward? What have we learned from our stories that carry us into our space now as mathematicians and math educators?
I know that's it. You ask good questions, good hard questions.
You got to take some time to think about it.
Yeah. Everybody should be in the academic courses. Everybody should be doing the higher level math, and everybody can do it if it's taught and if they're given the opportunity.
Audience, I want you guys to dig in and address this question for me. What can white teachers or just non-Black teachers do to foster a safe, inviting environment?
So the advice I would give is for white teachers. First of all, I've seen many white teachers that do wonderful jobs with
Yes.
kids of color, white kids in general. And so, but my own advice would be the first thing is to love those kids as if they're your own. If you have kids, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So that would be the first thing. Love those kids as if they were your own. So are you going to allow your own child to not do something to the level of expectation? Or are you going to give your own child a pass and not let them learn what they need to learn? And so my first thing would be treat them like they're your own kids.
Sometimes when we tell audiences, when I talk to audiences and they hear words like love and high expectations, sometimes they gravitate towards really, really, really dumbed down experiences, right? And what does it really mean to teach your child? And I wonder if white teachers listening to this, non-Black teachers listening to this, understand what it means when it says teaching me like I am your child. It means the highest expectation where failure is not an option, where lack of access is not an option, where the idea that I'm not gifted is not an option.
Right.
Exactly.
So
and letting go of those beliefs that, like you said, I'm sorry, Dr. Holly.
Oh, no, go ahead.
And just letting go of those, or not entering into the classroom with beliefs that these students can't, like, don't give yourself an excuse to have low expectations. And what I mean by that is that many of us have these low expectations, don't give students the opportunity to learn these higher level things. And then we insert an excuse why. Well, they didn't do it in middle school. They didn't do it in high school. They have to work after school. All of these excuses that we give ourselves to not give students those high opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
I would say let go of that.
So that's
it's interesting that you mentioned love. I attended a virtual panel, and Dr. Crystal Laura said that the path forward should be grounded in love, justice, and joy. And this is how she defined love. I'm looking at my notes. She says love is the concrete action we take to enhance or alter our own or someone else's well-being. So when you say to love those children, that's what we should be doing. We need to be thinking about how we can alter for the better or enhance their well-being, and you do that by having high expectations.
But this idea of love means, are you advocating strongly? Are you resisting criminalized policy? In other words, are you resisting tracking in mathematics, right? Are you resisting placement these placement pipelines, these placement prisons that people find themselves in. Do you love me enough to challenge inequitable structures? You
Yes.
know, and if you don't, then that's a disconnect. Given where you are now, and given what you hope for Black children and Black people in mathematics, what's the next space
So
for you?
looking at critical issues that are taking place within schools. So even some of the things that we've talked about tonight, tracking, some of the things that our Black and brown students go through in school, how educators can resist those systems of oppression, how educators can stand up and say something, and even how parents can begin to advocate for their own. I really look forward to being a teacher educator, in the sense of speaking to teachers and encouraging them in some of these ways that they can begin to investigate their own implicit bias and how that may be coming across in classrooms.
You know what though,
Yeah.
as students, in graduate school, we're taught to sort of like
Mhm.
name it what it is, but try to be gentle about it. I'm past that now.
Mm.
Yeah,
It's racism. Don't be a
Well,
racist.
I'm learning from y'all.
hey, what Black Lives Matter has given us is a bolder platform. Things
Mm.
as it's because it's prickled the global conscience, right? It's really prickled the global conscience around uh, of hidden racism and institutional racism, and it's turned
Right.
it inside out and made it visible.
Yeah.
And people, both Black and white, are turning to each other as allies and space to tackle this thing. So we have to speak more boldly, and that might mean, you just made me think of something. That might mean rejecting our own language that we learn, rejecting our own language, the language of the academy, the sweet smelling, savory
Yeah.
of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and challenging the space, right?
And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I'm just trying to get out of it. It's hard to do. But it can be done. It's going to take practice. I want to see, I want to create games, books, media, curriculum that is specifically designed for Black people.
This is the reason why Pie Before Dinner was created, because when we look at the landscape of some of our most popular stuff, it doesn't have us in it.
No representation.
We're not in movies. We're not in textbooks. We don't own even these resources that our districts buy. We don't own them. We don't own them. We're not getting rich by. We're not being, if we're so good in math, why are we broke? Kind of thing. This whole. I really want in this era of Black Lives Matter. I really want white folk. I really want Black folk. All of us to really understand this. How invisibilized. If that's, I just need to put that in. We are made in math, in this thing called mathematics, and if we recapture this space, if we take this space right now, we can remake what math is, what it means to teach it, and what it means to learn it together. We can retake it, but it means obviously to shifting the power balance, and that's not something that was ever taught.